the people, they work,
Awesome. This is Shardul Dabir, the Innovation Specialist with the Good Food Institute India team, like you all know. And I'm going to quickly share the poster for today's webinar. As you all know, this is part of our Inspiration webinar series for phase 2, that is the ideation phase of the India Smart Protein Innovation Challenge. And today is our last webinar in this series, webinar number 10. It's a SciTech workshop. We have Alfred C. Cheung with us, who's a consultant for the food tech program at BRINC, which is one of the accelerators focused on the smart protein sector and one of our partners for the Innovation Challenge as well. And he's also a visiting professor at Jinan University in China and a lecturer of food science at University of Hong Kong. Today, we are going to talk about quite a few things, like I was saying earlier, but majority will focus on the practical aspects and the commercial aspects and learn from a lot of mistakes of entrepreneur startups in the past that Alfred has consulted. He comes with a lot of rich industry experience and also consulting experience in the food sector, and also has a very good understanding of food science and technology and the processes involved therein. So he would be an expert speaker who would be able to guide us with conceptualization, scale up, execution, practical implications, a bunch of case studies, a lot of pitfalls that usually startups go into when they're trying to execute on their innovative ideas, and much more. Having said that, I'm going to quickly stop sharing my screen and going to invite Dr. Alfred to get started with his presentation.
All right. Good evening to all of you. Many of you are in India as well as in other countries. I'm Alfred Cheung, and I'm speaking from California. Right now over here is bright and early, about 7 o'clock in the morning. And it's so nice to be able to spend my morning with you folks, with all of you. And in particularly, today being able to have opportunity to sharing some of my background experience with you, particularly addressing the area of the plant-based food and plant food. Thank you so much, Shardul, for your early introduction. I'm indeed honored to be able to participate and contribute to your program. This is indeed something of which I think we, as a global citizens, should always keep in mind how food can affect our life, and how food can make the world better. And all of us, rather right now engaging in the food business or not, even if you are new or already in the food business area, it's very important. Not to underestimate your ability, your impact towards society. We can surely working together to make the world better. There's nothing more critical than food, not just to sustain life, but indeed whatever we do can make the world better. And for those of us that's involved in the product development area, like what we were discussing, your impact, your contribution towards this area are even more greater than you think for most of you. Just to quickly speaking, the food, using packaging material, of course, when you produce it, you need to process it. All these, factors affect the environment directly or indirectly. Depends on the choice of material you use, depends on the choice of processing used. Of course, no less, the ingredient you use also affect the environment, but more importantly too, affect the health of individuals. What the composition of the food products themselves, how you process that, and how the type of packaging you use, not just affect the product quality, but affect the well-being of everyone, the society. I hope, because of this understanding, I just discussed now, you feel good working for the food industry. Indeed, you can make, impacts on the well-being of others. Okay, so without further ado, let's go on with the material. Are you okay?
Can you share your screen? Till then, I'll
Yeah,
just make a quick announcement. Basically, this is a very interactive workshop, everyone. I made this announcement for people who joined in on time. but we'll be asking for your participation throughout. This is not a theoretical workshop where we're just reading a bunch of stuff from the slide and then you kind of take it theoretically. We're also going to have a lot of case studies, a lot of practical examples. So make sure that you participate in through the chat box for any responses. If you have any questions, I would recommend you to submit them as and when they occur to you. And obviously, please feel free to, invite your teammates to join in so that they don't miss on this session. Thank you so much. Dr. Alfred, you can get started.
Okay, thank you, Shardul. So let's discuss, right now, let's begin our discussion, and the discussion will last maybe for no more than 2 hours, and then you have, hopefully we'll give you enough time to ask any questions you have. I want to emphasize, stress today, we are not going to go into a lot of things that is highly technical. I'm sure some of the presenters already gave you a lot of good information in those areas, but instead I want to focus on things of which you cannot find it in reference material, in text material, and something of which, however, they're very useful for you as a startup or as someone who wants to or planning to engage in the food business. Some of the mistakes, some of the problems of which I encountered and I made myself in the past. And so I want to share with you so that, you do not make the same mistakes as I have done in the past. And no doubt you will be smarter than I am. That's the reason this is called Smart Protein Innovation Challenge. I'm sure, by learning from all the presenters that has been done in the past, as well as today's discussion, will enable you, to establish your startup program in a much more efficient, effective, and successful manner. Okay. So without further ado, let's go ahead and begin then. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah, let's get started.
Okay. So today, this is called food product development, mission to possible, and a barrier to success. Concept, scale up, execution, practical implication, case study, pitfalls, and more. There's some meaning, to the title itself. Of course, it's food product development, but also mission to possible. Now, I think as an R&D person, everything is possible. But at the same time, depending how you look at it, everything could be impossible too. Well, in the plant-based food arena, there's a brand name called Impossible. So we are going to turn something impossible to possible today. And how are we going to make it possible? And by working smart, by being creative and things like that. As well as, in order to make it possible, there are a lot of barriers, a lot of hurdles that prevent us from getting successful. So we'll be talking about that. How to take care of these barriers, how to become more successful. As I said earlier, we are going to go through some of the basic R&D steps very quickly for a minute or two, because other presenters already gave their information material in this area. And so in today's discussion, we talk about primarily in the area of practical implications, using case studies, using my 30, 40 years working in food industry. And I'm very happy today being able to sharing with you, and particularly in the area of the some of the mistakes I made, the pitfalls, and how to prevent yourself to making the same mistake. One thing I want to emphasize before we begin is, instead of, I'm not trying to be modest. Actually, I make tons and tons of mistakes, and really it's a fact. And as a matter of fact, when you do food product development or any kind of research work, do not look at failure as truly failure. Failure is almost the next step to success, because if everything you do, every time you conduct a test experiment is successful, then there's no need to really do research. We already have medicine, vaccine already discovered. For COVID-19, of which many of us are facing today in the world. So as a result, I mean, it's kind of given and granted that there will be a lot of failures. There will be a lot of mistakes during the course of doing the product development work, I mean, R&D work. But our responsibility is how to minimize it, how to learn from making mistakes. So if you can only remember a few words from today's presentation is, don't be afraid to make mistakes, okay? I encourage you to go out to make mistakes. The thing is, you must learn from the mistakes and hopefully do not make silly mistakes. Even mistakes, I mean, there are some good mistakes, some are really, really silly. Silly are those things of which you're not prepared for. You don't prepare for the worst, what the outcome would be. And then when there's a mistake, you get really surprised. You do not know how to react to it, and you would not have a chance to learn from it. A good mistake is something of which you already have that prepared in advance, psychologically, mentally. Hey, if it does not work out, what's the next step? Okay, etc., etc. And particularly importantly, you already focus yourself. There got to be something I can learn. I mean, if indeed the experiment result does not turn out the way it's supposed to be. Okay, so with that in mind, I mean, so very happy today to share some of my past experience with you, I mean, in this area. But again, don't be afraid to make mistakes. These are totally acceptable. Now, instead of, I mean, giving references and citation to every single slide, I mean, when there's a need, I mean, I just use these web pages to give you a lot of these links of which are some of the materials, maybe extract, I mean, for today's presentation discussion. And for some others of which, I mean, I did not put it out here, the citations, there may be too many of them. I want to offer my gratitude, appreciation for the authors, I mean, that provide me the information that is, which I use, I mean, in today's presentation. Thank you for the generosity and allow me to share those information with you. Okay, so let's begin our discussion today. So the first thing is, well, I mean, today we are talking about plant-based food. But what is plant food and what is plant-based food? Are there actually any differences? I mean, all of us, I mean, we all know, I mean, there's, in our world, I mean, there are plants, there's animal, I mean, plant kingdom and animal kingdom. And so presumably, maybe somewhere around, along half of that, I mean, is plant food, I mean, for the plant kingdom, and then is plant-based food. There are differences, okay? Today, we focus primarily on plant-based food. Plant-based food, I mean, instead of talking about vegetables, there's agronomy or grains or cereals, etc., etc. Those are different disciplines. But of course, the raw material for plant-based food, those are from plants, majority of from plant. Sometimes in the food that there may be plant-based food, there may be some nutrient added. I mean, for example, vitamin and mineral. I mean, some of those, I mean, could be derived from animal sources, I mean, et cetera, et cetera. But majority of those will be from plant-based. And plant-based food basically is a food product which is derived from plant. And with, however, the biggest difference is with the intention to mimic, I mean, the animal counterpart. Usually, that's the major difference as compared to just regular, fruits and vegetables and things like that. Okay, so plant-based food usually is a processed food of which containing, either 100%, close to 100% of that is plant from plant origin, and so it's a processed food in general. Okay, so is plant-based food truly better for you, for humanity? Well, this is what we'll be talking about today. Okay, in our presentation, a lot of people think, well, the plant-based food got to be better. I mean, the animal. I mean, is it really true? I mean, you will find out, I mean, in the next few slides. And if indeed is not the case, why? How come it's not? I mean, because most people think plant-based food, they are better for you. But is it really better? And if it's not better, why it's not? And how can we do to make it better? As a food scientist, as an educator, or as a start company, or which you plan to engage yourself in producing plant-based foods. There's a lot of new entries, however. I mean, for example, I mean, just today, I mean, I understand that there may be over hundreds of people participate listening to today's presentation, and that's great. But on the other hand, these are all your friendly competitors too. And how are we going to make it, make yourself, I mean, standing out from your competitors? How can you make yourself, make your own product, have greater consumer appeal, and how to become a successful startup? Now, to begin with, I mean, I think it's great off you have the desire, the interest, I mean, to engage yourself, to contribute yourself, your talent, your skills in this arena to make the world better. But like everything in life, I mean, it's going to be doomed. There will be some failures. And new product introduction, the success rate is very, very low. We have to set a reasonable expectation. Typically, I mean, for new product introduction, for food products, I mean, less than 6% of new product will be successful. After 5 years, I mean, still staying in the market. So you as a startup, I mean, is to see how you can increase the odds. If you can make 100%, if you come up with a bright idea, very, very good idea, well, that is great. And I can't wait, I mean, to and look forward to seeing your product out in the marketplace, allowing me to try, I mean, your effort and skill in this area. Okay, so why do we have plant-based food? I mean, because of perceived health benefits. I mean, remain #1 purchase driver of plant-based food. According to the latest study by Mason is a market research and research R&D, contract R&D research facility here in the California area, quite well known. And in this arena, because a lot of consumer feels that, I mean, I feel better when I eat plant-based food, at least psychologically, because they think, hey, I mean, I'm making myself healthier and also making the world better. So they feel that, I mean, they kind of have an effect on the well-being of the society, on the outcome of this, I mean, on the health of others. So this is the reason why there's such an increase in the popularity of plant-based food. Okay. Now, earlier we said that is plant-based food truly better than animal sources or animal-based food? Is a piece of steak actually not as good as plant-based steak, or is an Impossible Burger, Beyond Burgers, these plant-based burgers, are they really better than animal regular meat burgers? I'm not going to discuss this line by line, but this is debatable. And I will support this, further with additional slides. I want to point this out is that how good a plant-based food is depends on your talents, your innovation, your creativity, and your own formulations, product formulation, how you process it, etc., etc. Not all plant-based food, they are good for you. Some are not as good, and some actually are terrible. Okay, and we all know that we need amino acids. Some of those are essential amino acids, and therefore, need to be taken in, from external sources. And that, some plant-based food and many plants, most of the plants, the protein quality, that is the composition of the amino acid profile within the plant's product itself, together with regard to how easy is to be absorbed by the body, etc., etc. A lot of times they're not as good as regular the animal counterpart. For example, the Impossible Burger, they are coming from soy, so soy, of course, as a plant, they don't have some nutrient which we need in the body, say for example iron and things like that. So by knowing what are the deficiency of the ingredient you use in the plants, I mean, then you can supplement each other. You can choose ingredient that complement each other, and that's the intent. So, but in general, plant-based food, I mean, we'll discuss it a bit further. They are not, I mean, as equal as animal-based food. But however, that said, animal-based food, I mean, is not as good as we think either. I mean, so we have to eat carefully. I encourage people to eat a balanced diet. For example, animal-based food, of course, we know it has some of those undesirable fat, I mean, saturated fat and cholesterol and things like that. So overindulgence of any specific product categories is not going to be very good for your health. So you need to know the strength and weakness of each product, the plant-based food, and then try to eat a more balanced category. Now, so in this slide, I mean, in this slide, we talk about the protein quality score. I mean, the protein quality efficiency. That is a PTCAAS and DIAAS. I mean, you can Google and search that further. The PTCAAS stands for protein digestibility correct amino acid score, and the DIAAS, I mean, stands for digestible indispensable amino acid score. Of course, in the past, we also talk about protein efficiency ratio, PER. That's very old. Today, in the plant-based area as well as the nutrition area, we tend to focus more on the DIAAS, which stands for, as I said, digestible, indispensable amino acid score. And this is more meaningful. I mean, when we talk about protein quality, when we talk about nutrition, we all know it's very important to have sufficient intake of protein, but not just the quantity, but also the quality. Using this table over here, you can see whey protein, of course, we all know come from cattle, from cow, and casein, dairy, I mean, things like that, the same. And then soy protein, isolate P, roasted, so on and so forth. A lot of our protein sources have been today using plant-based food. They're from soybean, soy protein, and you can see actually the protein quality ratio, I mean, is significantly lower than, I mean, animal source. I mean, so you can see this is on about less than 1. I mean, and over here, the casein and whey protein, they're significantly higher. I mean, 15, 20 some %. And within, I mean, the plant-based arena ingredient, you can see soy protein actually is better than pea protein, oats, and cooked beans, and so on and so forth. But however, what we are trying to say is, in a plant-based food, you usually use a combination, a variety of these plant ingredient, and part of that is to offset some of those defects, like soybean. They have beany taste and beany flavor, things like that. And then you can use oats, I mean, to kind of balance the taste off. So all these plant sources, they their own, amino acid profile. By knowing what they have and what they need of, I mean, you can use a variety, of plant-based material to come up with a finished product, truly have a better nutritional content than will compare to using one ingredient alone. But in general, I mean, the plant-based ingredient are still lacking, I mean, the animal-based ingredient. That's the reason sometimes in the plant-based ingredient, we sometimes use yeast, we use eggs, and depends, if it's allowed, I mean, as a vegan, I don't mean plant-based product, but some vegetarian, they eat a little bit more balanced, I mean, including eating not just, I mean, only vegetable, but they allow themselves to eat, I mean, sometimes cheese and eggs and things like that. And dairy ingredient. So it depends on individual preferences. But even if you're vegan, a strict vegan, you can still select materials that supplement each other. Okay. Okay. So over here in this slide, I mean, what we are trying to say is, I mean, plant-based food sometimes, I mean, can be good for you. And most of the time, they are good for you. But however, not all plant-based food, they are equal, and some of those, they are actually pretty bad for your health. And this has come from, I mean, another article on bioethics. I mean, meat alternatives, warning, more evidence is needed on the health and sustainability claims. Instead of going into a lot of details on this discussion, in your, I mean, the citations on the first page of the link, I mean, which I provide to you, you can read through some of the medical articles and can understand a little bit further exactly what I'm trying to point out. Many and most of alternative meat products, so-called, I mean, plant-based food, they're highly processed. This is according to author, I mean, Morrison. And the word highly processed has a lot of technical meaning and legal meaning. It cannot be used, I mean, very liberally without fully understand the implication. And so there's some repercussion on that. It has high starch level, contain the same amount of calories and saturated fat. And many, it could be sometimes, I mean, the plant-based version can be worse than the regular meat version, as beef burger, according to Newfield Council on Bioethics. So it's very important that we understand that plant-based food is not necessarily better for you, better for health, better for the environment. Such claim, I mean, is debatable, and then you need to be sure you're aware of it and then address this concern and hopefully develop a product truly is better for others health-wise and for the environment, okay? So is plant-based food truly healthy and better for the environment? From my point of view, it depends. It's not necessary. Could some plant-based food actually is a glorified form of junk food? There actually a lot of examples like that. Could plant-based food also cause harm to the environment? Is debatable, but refer to the link, I mean, provided, because, for example, the reason I'm saying is that give you a quick answer on that. A lot of times you say that because in the beach area, animal, they need to take a lot of water, etc., etc. And so raising food, I mean, through cattle, animal, the use of water is a lot. We also know that water is a limited resource in many parts of the world. Say, for example, in California, we have wildfires because there's never enough water over here. Over here is very dry year round. So water is a precious commodity. But some plant origin product, for example, like almonds and various kind of nuts, they take in a lot of water. Actually, more water than a lot of animal type products, say chicken and things like that. So it's not in addition to that, when you raise, I mean, when you grow plants, besides taking water, you also take fertilizers. You also sometimes need to deforest. Cut down the trees in order to the plants. I mean, various crops. I mean, say for example, like palm trees for the palm oil. So they also have devastated, I mean, effects on the environment. So it's not necessarily plant food is always better than animal food. We've got the sustainability. It depends how you handle that. We've got to, I mean, plant food, I mean, can be as devastating and can also be bad for you, I mean, as a junk food. Just because it's plant-based does not mean it's good food. Good plant-based food requires innovation. And more importantly, social responsibility. How you, I mean, consider well-being of the others. And really disturbingly, I mean, today, a lot of times, we think of plant food, I mean, it's good, but at the same time, we do not fulfill, I mean, such perception consumer has. And that's our obligation and responsibility to truly fulfill their expectation. We always look at, how a company, how business can be successful. A company and business can be successful because it exceeded the expectation of the consumer. You cannot fool the consumer all the time. Eventually, consumer will wake up sooner than you think because of the social media. So it's best to do what is right to others, not just right for yourself. So we should always consider the well-being of others than ourselves. So most of the current plant-based food cannot be labeled as natural because, as I just said earlier, they're highly processed. Under the current FDA standard in the United States, TVP is a highly processed end product. It doesn't grow up the soil, TVP, which is a typical common ingredient used in the plant-based food. TVP is not a good protein substitute. None or little oil soluble contain very little or not at all of any oil soluble trace vitamins and minerals. Primarily because the TVP typically they have hardly any fat content. So during the extraction process, any of these oil soluble vitamins and they are all extracted out too. Soy is also considered as an allergen, as we all know, and many times it's very difficult to be GMO, genetic modified, free of genetic modified organisms, because how the soy is being grown in the field. So it's very, very difficult for some countries to label soy as GMO free. However, if you were to summarize that, and it's up to us to make sure whatever you're working on the plant-based food, they actually fulfilling the perception of consumers. While they are plant-based junk food, what I mean by giving you an example, what is called plant-based junk food. We many times, when we go to a fast food restaurant, say McDonald's, Burger King, some of those are really plant-based, or plant-sourced. Say French fries. Okay, is French fries good food for you? They are plant-based, right? Or they are plant-sourced. Only potato, of course. They may add the additive. So on and so forth. But we all know eating too much French fries, as much as I like it crunchy and things like that. But they're not very good for you, right? If you eat too much, and the same goes to say, fried product. Rather it's a fish burger or chicken burger. Chicken nugget. Say you're working on a plant-based chicken nugget, or you're working on a plant-based fish fillet. Are they really good as you think? Yes and no. Depends on the formulation, depends on the recipe. The plant-based, fish fillet, still require frying and absorb a lot of oil, and those of course lead to obesity and things like that. So just because plant-based food, typically they have low cholesterol, but typically we highlight only the benefits of these nutrients, but we do not, or we overlook intentionally, unintentionally, some of the defects of this plant-based food. So it's up to us, as a food scientist, as an entrepreneur in the style business, in the food area, plant-based area, to pay close attention so that indeed the food you develop yourself into consumer, they're as good as consumer think it is. So even though so plant-based food, they are rather they're good or bad, is highly contested. Increased consumption of plant-based food will improve overall the health and sustainability. Though proper selection of plant-based ingredient product will help to discourse further. Really important for those for many of you, wanting to get into this area. No two plant-based food are the same. It's up to the food scientist, food company, and yourself as a startup to form the food product. Truly, we help to achieve this objective of improved health and sustainability. Okay, so in summary, what I'm trying to get at is plant-based food, honestly speaking, we tend to overpromise and underdeliver. And not all the plant-based food, is as good as we think. And some of those are indeed bad. By pointing out the good and the bad part today, I want you, I wish all of you will be able to keep this in mind, be aware of this, and then develop product, plant-based food product. Those meat analog, that mimic the meat counterparts, to be truly better for yourself and for the consumers and for the society as a whole. So, as an entrepreneur, the first thing we always look at is, hey, how are we going to get the product out in the market, successful, selling a lot, etc., etc. Whenever we do things, we only focus on profit, particularly short-term profit. Usually, the result is total disaster. Okay, and instead, we should always focus on long-term profitability, social responsibility, particularly. Okay, when you develop a product, sure is good for others, for the society. Really consider the impact of the society and fulfill the obligation as a social responsibility side. The profit will come naturally. Okay, maybe a little bit slower than you want, but it certainly will come. And in a greater amount of profitability than you also early anticipate. Because if you do something good for others, for the world, for the society, sooner or later, the others will discover. Particularly today, the timetable gets shorter and shorter. Why? Because of social media. Facebook, Twitter, whatever, okay? Your social circles, WhatsApp, WeChat, etc., etc. So good things, get spread out fast. So are bad things. So if you develop a product which is very good, for in health, wholesome, and the society, people will discover this earlier than you think than in the past. We've done a lot of promotion and advertisement. So profitability will come when someone practices social responsibility. And that is the reason, particularly right now in the marketplace, consumer has such a great expectation on the plant-based food. It's up to us to deliver, what we try to convey to the consumer, that plant-based food, they are indeed better for you and the world. So it's very important to keep in mind, when we conduct business, there's a code of business ethics, as well as, be a smart, there are a lot of smart consumer outside. And before we do anything, we need to set the right business trend for long-term, profitability, not only for short-term basis. Do not look at consumer being ignorant, and they are a lot more smart consumer than we think. Very, very few exceptions of being ignorant, because food is something of which we eat every day. Majority of the consumer out there are a lot smarter, and many times smarter than we are ourselves. However, you are playing a very important role in this, how we fulfill those perceptions, the message we send out to the consumer. So luckily, compared to other situations of which you don't have any effect and impact, but food is something of which everyone need to have an intake every day. So whatever you do, it affects the well-being of others faster, closely. So what are some of the technical hurdles of plant-based food? Typically, again, emphasize again, we try to focus on area which you find useful quickly. Typically among plant-based food, because a lot of those come from TVP, thus, a lot of those are for taste. There's a beany taste, a beany odor, So our job as food scientists, as a product developer, is how to take care of that, how to mask it, how to mask these defects, this odor, this taste, and how to make the product taste better, smells better, and also texture. Texture they tend to be a little bit loose. Sometimes maybe too tight. I mean, depends on the type of stabilizers you use. Typically, I mean, plant-based food, unless you go through extrusion process, otherwise, I mean, you need to hold them together, right? I mean, rather you use starch, gums, or whatever. But compared to whole meats, I mean, muscle, of which they have got connective tissue, I mean, to hold the muscle cell together. But in the case of plant-based food, I mean, you need stabilizer because typically they tend to be a bunch of loose ingredients, so you need something to hold them together. So the texture depends on the stabilizer you use. I mean, starches or gums and things like that. It can be too loose or too tight. Earlier, we also said about the not just quantity of the protein available in a serving of this plant-based food, but also the quality and how well they are being digested. By knowing, I mean, to have a better knowledge in this area, you can find ingredients of which supplement, I mean, on the quality side, as well as in making it easy and more digestible, I mean, on the product you're going to be developing. Now, this is the R&D product development process. I mean, today we discuss food product development, but I'm not going to get into a lot of discussion in this because I think other presenters also talked about it already. But what we want to kind of highlight a few areas, which I mean is very important, and but over here, I mean, we all know R&D, I mean, is a structured, systematic process, not just, I mean, mixing few ingredients together, hey, try it and see what that is. That is not the way it is. Any kind of R&D work, rather it's food or not, I mean, rather it's for Apple, iPhone, or for, I mean, McDonald's, I mean, cheeseburger or French fries. This require a lot, they are rather sophisticated, require a lot of knowledge, food science, to come with a product truly is good for consumer, truly is marketable. So we go through a lot of phases, I mean, from idea, I mean, to prepare prototypes, I mean, scaling up and commercialization, involve process and packaging and things like that. We are also involve financial concerns and shelf life, etc., etc., etc. So we'll be talking about that, I mean, quickly, but just want to highlight R&D process, the product development process is very sophisticated, has a structure, has a system. Don't do it haphazardly. Don't do it just like preparing a dish at home. Okay, there's a lot of nuances, and there's also a lot of good textbook, reference book in this area. And moreover, I mean, if you're interested to engage in this area further, and I can be of help to you, by all means, contact me, I mean, through your local, I mean, GFI chapter in India. Okay. So these are the major steps, I mean, on the food product development side. I mean, to be frankly speaking, I'm a professor teaching, I mean, courses at the graduate school level at a few universities. Right now, I only teach a couple of universities now because of time limitation. And food product development really is something of which really dear to me. My core competency, I mean, is in the food product development area. Working in large corporations, I mean, like Nestle, Conagra, Heinz, Kraft, and things like that on a global basis. So I get engaged in the product development side, R&D side, because of the, I mean, the satisfaction when you develop something on which someone can affect the well-being of others. So that's the reason I truly enjoy product development. And as my first job, I mean, till today, sharing my experience with you. So I hope all of you, I mean, that's involved in this area, feel the same, I mean, satisfaction, fulfillment, but at the same time, the same kind of responsibility. You as a product developer in food products, what you need to do in order to avoid food scandals. Okay, so your food product development, there are several major categories: the concept stage, development stage, implementation stage, and the post-launch stage. I'm not going to get into a lot of details per se, because we don't have time, and this may have been covered by other presenters. But out of these 4 stages, can any one of you, tell me which step is the most important step along this R&D process? So, of course, I cannot ask you this question directly, but I give you 30 seconds to think of it before we move on to other stages. Actually, I give you a tip already. Some hints over here on this slide, and if you watch this slide carefully, many steps and along the R&D process, the R&D pathway. And of course, every step, they have their significance, they have their own, every step is very important, but which one is the most important that affect the outcome the greatest?
So a lot of people are saying concept development stage, but some people are also saying post-launch stage will be most important.
All right. Well, the answer actually is the concept stage. Because if the concept is wrong, everything's wrong, right? It's no different than everything we do in life. The first step, it's just like when you first learn how to drive. As a driver, if you, the first step, how you learn to drive, the habit. When you start driving the car, your gesture, your posture, how you sit, etc., etc. All these basic steps, is very important to be a safe driver. So the concept stage, of which I underline here in red, highlighted in red, is the most critical step. And also, however, is the most, forgotten step, or the least focused step. People, tend not to move on too quickly. They don't understand exactly what they plan to do, what they are trying to do, what they're trying to achieve, and move on to other steps. And therefore, everything that is afterwards become, many times become a disaster. Okay, so it's the concept stage. We'll explain this a little bit further. Okay. Now, so the first thing is, before we do anything, the project objective must be consumer-centric. That is, it must be focused what the consumer wants, okay, not what we want, okay. In everything we do, we sell the product consumer, these are the end users. We need to look at the taste profile, the quality profile. The everything, organoleptically as well as nutritionally speaking, and as well as the aspects. From the consumer point of view, it's not necessary whether you like the product or not, but would the customer, the end user, would they like it? Would they buy from you? You are the only one of the many customers, but you cannot sell everything you produce to yourself only, right? You have to sell to tens of thousands of customers, consumer. You must listen to them. Are they the one that will actually buy from you? So everything we do, we have to look at from their point of view, not our own view, okay? And is the product too salty? Too spicy? Your own personal opinion is a good starting point, but you should not use your own personal judgment to decide on everything, what the consumer think of the product. At the end of the day, you must be a good listener. And that is very important. You hear the messages for the consumer, okay, by doing market research, by doing sensory evaluation and all those things in a greater pool of people. So consumer-centric is the first thing we must know. We must always keep that in mind. And secondary is project objective. Exactly what we're trying to achieve. So if we are trying to produce plant-based food Is it just because it only contain plain ingredient? What other value we are trying to provide to the consumer? But we think of it this way: why the consumer want to buy our product? You must give them some value, some propositions, or which they feel, they feel like to buy the product from you. Remember, this is real crowded field now, particularly for today's crop of or future crops of a startup company. There are hundreds of companies already working in this area. You are the next 100 or 200 or 300 companies. So this is getting very, very competitive, very crowded. So your objective must be standing out compared to other competitors. Otherwise, it's going to be very tough for you to be successful. So take time to understand, to know what you are trying to deliver to the consumer. That's become really important. And of course, before you do anything, you need to have a standard, a gold standard. What you're trying to replicate. If you're working for, say, a beef patty, analog. So what are you trying to replicate? Is it, something already available in the marketplace? Rather it's McDonald's or Burger King or Carl Jr. or whatnot. Or some actual big counterparts available in the supermarket, in the fresh meat area, etc., etc. You must clearly understand, identify what is standard you need to replicate. Now, as much as I feel great and seeing all of you being interested in this area as a startup company, but we also need to be modest. Very few of you, very, very few of you, very, very, very few of you will come an idea truly is groundbreaking. Very few. Most of the ideas is just as bad as B2 or maybe an improvement of others. Okay, so typically it's very unlikely you do not have something to compare with, a standard to compare with. Okay, there should be someone already doing something like that, but maybe you have a better idea, improve upon on it. Okay, but it's impossible. I don't want to say impossible, but rather improbable. You have something of which no one ever have done yet. Okay, it's possible, but rather improbable. So you should be able to always find something of which are available in the marketplace, or at least as a concept. So try to finalize and confirm what you're trying to do as a standard to compare with, so that you do not move your standard all the time. It's a shifting target. A gold standard is something of which you must keep that in mind, and then use that to compare to what you are trying to get accomplished. So this is something of which I always put it right on my desk, and then look at the product, what I'm developing, and look at the gold standard. Are they close enough? We cannot change the gold standard periodically. And this is a sin, SIN, many startup companies commit, unintentionally, because they keep, usually they have an idea today, and they probably have another idea tomorrow, and maybe the day after tomorrow. So as a result, keep shifting focuses, keep shifting the standards. It's not going to be the right path to success, okay? And then, of course, there's regulatory standards and food safety. Food is a highly regulated product. You cannot just do anything you want. Okay, for example, in the cultured, meat product area, cell-based meats, things like that. There's a great deal of regulatory hurdles. You cannot just call it, meat, if it's cultured from stem cell research or whatever, because, this product, the labeling issue, need to be approved by the government. And many countries, they still don't, as far as I know, there's no country in the world that have the guideline, how you call that yet. So they still need to be finalized and standardized. So as a result, always before you do R&D work, know what are the standards, what are the regulatory requirements. And most importantly, it had to be safe. Product tastes good or bad, may be subjective, but food safety is very objective. Under no circumstances we should launch a product of which there's a question about the safety of the food product. Okay, And you also need to know the differences of product. I mean, on the scale, when you scale it to production, I mean, commercialization, I mean, the product will likely very different compared to the product making the laboratory. Shelf life, I mean, what the product looks like, tastes like today, will be different a month, 2 months, 6 months, a year from now. And some product can be have 2, 3 years of shelf life, depends on how you process that, okay, packaging. And make sure you use the evaluation, I mean, you conduct that objective as compared to personal opinion, personal liking or not. I mean, those can be only used as a starting point, but eventually you must have a larger population of your consumers or customers to try the product. So conduct market research and taste panel to support whatever opinion you have in a more objective manner and more convincing manner too. All right, so with that in mind, I mean, why don't we take a 5-minute break and we'll continue our conversation afterwards, okay?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Alfred. We'll take a quick break for a couple of minutes and all the attendees can quickly drink water, get a cup of coffee, and then join us real quick at 8:35 Indian Standard Time. We'll wait for you and we'll get started in 5 minutes. Thank you. Meanwhile, others who are waiting on the workshop, if you have any questions about any of the slides till now is a good time to just add a little bit of detail to it and submit it through the Q&A button.
Sorry, the slide is a bit much. I'm going to switch it off, but I wanted to add a couple of things on the nutrition question. I think this is a really, really important question. I will email out my thoughts later via Shardul. But generally, it's important to note, as Alfred was rightly saying, that if you're making junk food with plant-based ingredients, it's still junk food, of course. That being said, there is a great report by our strong partner organization in Australia called Food Frontier, which talks about how when you compare the plant-based version of any of these products, like a burger or mince or sausages, to the animal-sourced version of that same product, the plant-based version comes out on top. So it is still better for you, even if you're making a junk food version or a plant-based version of a junk food that's normally sourced from animals. So that's something to note on the whole. And then of course, from the perspective of broader public health, food safety, etc., reduction of things like African swine fever, other zoonotic diseases, especially in a post-COVID world, we need to think about these things a lot, right? So these are the things to consider. I think from a public health standpoint, there's no contest. From an individual health standpoint, of course, if you're making a junk food, it's going to be a junk food, but still it's going to be slightly better than the animal source version of that junk food.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Everyone can see me now?
Yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, good. Okay, now, so one of the things of which I mean many times, particularly for someone that may be new to the product development area, is that they think of the recipe, I mean, as a critical part or the only part in a product success or affecting the outcome of the product itself. If someone would tell me, and this is typically a mistake made by many startup companies, very often they think, I mean, the product recipe itself is very secretive, very important. But recipe itself, no doubt, is important. But I think, I mean, many times, a lot of people give it more credit than is necessary, than is appropriate. Say today, I mean, someone, I mean, share, I mean, say a Coca-Cola recipe with you or Pepsi-Cola with you, or many times, sometimes, I mean, if you look at, go to McDonald's website, they actually tell you how they process, I mean, they say chicken nuggets, how they make the French fries, etc., etc. So the information is readily available together with internet. I mean, so a lot of information available on internet now. And some company is very happy to share it with you. And but the recipe itself, for someone that has a significant experience and to get a label information on decoration, ingredient decoration and things like that, in most situations, even KFC, the secret blend, spices and seasonings, it can actually be analyzed and come up with something nearly almost identical, if not very, very similar to the counterpart. So recipe itself is not as critical to product success as many of us think. By all means, I'm not suggesting, hey, print out your product recipe. But the problem is when you're not willing to discuss and sharing the recipe with your colleagues, as well as with your team, and many times is an indication of your lack of understanding how actually a product is being developed, okay, because always it's a team effort. So if you know the recipe of, say, McDonald's fish fillet, you're not going to be able to market the product as successful as they are. Product success depends on a lot of factors. First of all, it's called McDonald's. So that is already a great deal of differences. Because of the goodwill of the brand itself, and in addition, there is also how the product is being sold, the process and packaging, etc., etc. So all these tangible, intangible factors affect the success of the product when it's launched. So in the case of food product, in new product development, the product recipe itself is not as secretive as you think. But for someone with the food science background, decades of years of background, and also with analytical means, you all likelihood someone will be able to come with something very, very close together already. And besides, as you know, in the cola area, there's Pepsi Cola, Coca-Cola, there's a lot of generic name and things like that. But so far, the two major players in the world is still Pepsi Cola and Coca-Cola, as far as I know, right? Even though, many of those are similar to each other. So the product recipe only plays a certain role, but not as critical as we think. Particularly, with popular technology experience, you should be able to come up something close enough. So it's more important on the product quality, on the success side, as well as being able to be patented. Okay, I use the word very importantly. Product recipe is very, very difficult to be patented unless it's totally unique. Say, for example, like drugs and things like that, medicine. But however, the process, the design, the packaging type actually is much easier to be patented. So in the case of food product, the processing side and the packaging, actually, they are more critical towards product success than the recipe itself. The same recipe produced at different plant location, using different process, will have a different outcome. The same product prepared in the laboratory, when it's will be totally different, okay, in most cases. So by focusing incorrectly on the recipe to prepare a product on the recipe only is the greatest mistake any product developer can make. So you must also focus, because processing, they varies a lot, from location to location, from plant to plant, and it's not readily available. Many, many times, these are trade secrets. And more importantly, too, you cannot Google search, how to produce a food product, particularly commercial sense. And many times, whatever available, they may be generalizing it. They don't tell you exactly how many seconds, how many minutes, what's the temperature, precise temperature, precise processing condition. All these parameters, even though you change a little bit, affect the product characteristics significantly. And the packaging too. I mean, what kind of packaging do you use? I mean, many times you cannot see, affect the shelf life, affect the quality. Rather, I mean, the product is being frozen, I mean, in a pouch or frozen in a box, IQF, all those things, I mean, affect the final product characteristics. So it's very important that when you develop food product, particularly as a food product developer, you must familiarize yourself on the processing side as well as in the packaging side. A recipe without knowing how to produce it is useless, okay? Successfully, I mean. And the product recipe, I mean, when developed without any idea how the product is going to be produced, and it's going to be a waste of time, not efficient. When you produce a product, when you develop a product, you must have some idea to begin with how the product is going to be processed. Say you're developing, I mean, RTE, ready-to-eat meal using a plant-based ingredient, okay? Say, I mean, you're producing, let's do it this way, a sausage, a plant-based sausage. I mean, if the sausage, would the sausage be produced, I mean, and processed to reach a shelf life of 1 month, 1 year, whatnot? If the product going to be frozen, go to retort, high temperature processing, or other means of preservation, process, and packaging. Without knowing that, you'll be really different the product. A product designed for frozen will be different than a product designed to be shelf stable, or designed, I mean, to go for other means, I mean, of preservation, process technology, say high pressure processing, okay? Because the type of stabilizers, the texture of the product will all be different. So it's very, very important you know all about these product characteristics, as well as parameters processing, and where the product going to be produced, and because of the facility differences in the design, equipment, affects the product outcome too. So you must always have all this, I mean, basic information available to you before you start actual R&D process. I emphasize this again, and again, because this is a typically many startup companies forgot or underappreciate the implication. Usually they develop product and later on, gee, they find out where are we going to produce it? Or the equipment they have in mind to produce a product is not available, I mean, in the factory they use. So that means they have to start over again, right? So please make sure you remember, do not make this sort of mistake. We can all make mistakes. We all make a lot of mistakes, but this is a mistake that's totally avoidable. And that's the reason you are participating in today's workshop. So, I mean, in the in new product development, I mean, you have the processing side. I mean, you have a product development side and also process development. I mean, very important how you produce a product instead of just product recipe. So if the question is asked to you, which part is more important? The concept, of course, is important, but within the concept itself, you also need to know how to produce a product. This area is important, but this area is even more important, okay? So the most important area is the concept itself, however, idea generation. Idea generation covers everything. I mean, objective itself. So this is what we have been talking about. I mean, when we develop food product, this is what we call 3P. This is the same lecture material I discussed with my students for many semesters already. Okay, so the 3P in food product development area is the product itself, the process, and the packaging, and they all interact with each other. Okay, so I mean this is what it stands for, 3P. Okay, product, process, and package. Okay, what are they and why they is important? We discussed it briefly already. A product recipe without knowing how to produce it really is not useful, meaningful. I mean, and that you can replicate. Okay, so you must know the process, how to produce a product, and then develop a product that can be produced. In general, it's a lot easier to change your product recipe, but a lot more difficult to change your process. Because when you change your process, you require many times new equipment, new expenditure, capitalization, and things like that. Say for example, I'll give you an example. Say chicken. Okay, now, this say a real meat chicken. If the process is go through a retort process, high temperature processing, say I'm making a chicken noodle soup, okay, you must know the process. So in the product recipe itself, if I were to make chicken noodle soup, I will use what kind of chicken? A young chicken or old chicken? If you are making chicken noodle soup at home, you would want to use young chicken, right? But if you would make a commercial produced chicken noodle soup, okay, go through a high temperature processing, will you be using the same young chicken, what we call broilers? Okay, broilers. We would not, because the young chicken, the meat is too tender during high temperature processing. You'll be all dissolved. Kind of dissolved. You'll disappear on you, okay, because the muscle, the connective tissue and the muscle fiber, they will be all broken down due to the high temperature processing. So the processing very, very important. And then if you know that in advance, hey, this is going to be chicken noodle soup commercially produced and with a shelf life of a year or so, so you want to use an old chicken to begin with in your ingredient. So in this case, it's pretty straightforward to change from young chicken to old chicken, what we call span chicken. Many times the chicken that has laid eggs already, a hen, hens of which they may be a year or so old. Compared to young chicken, many times they're only weeks old, 6-7 weeks old. And of course, packaging is very important too. Is the soup going to be, using example, is the soup going to be retort processed or frozen? Even if retort process, go to packaging, high temperature processing, it's still going to be in a pouch, retortable pouch, a retortable can, or even aseptically packaged can, etc., etc. So the packaging affects the shelf life, affects the product quality, the processing time, the product integrity, etc., etc. So when we do product development, we must think about all these three areas. And out of these three P, which one is more important now? Is it product, package, or process? I hope all of you get a good answer on this. The right answer is the process and then package. The least critical part for majority situation. Of course, as I said, in some cases, say for example, like in medicine, drugs are of course the product ingredient and things like that. But for food product, most of the time, it's the product itself. Now, when you go into a really high-tech area, say cultivated meat and things like the cultured meat, the product itself is pretty critical, but it is the process too, because how you replicate the cell is very, very important because they affect the cost and things like that. So processing is very, very important. All right. So when you develop product, you need specifications, ingredient, manufacturing, and finished product, the parameters. You need to be precise. And that is the reason I said that is very, very critical on the processing side. What I mean by precise is, you do not just say, cook until done, or your processing parameters, okay? Instead, you must specify, cook to certain temperature. Say, well, I live in the United States, so I get used to in Fahrenheit, so I apologize for that. So typically over here, say chicken is 165 degrees Fahrenheit, 160 degrees Fahrenheit minimum. And you also need to say specifically, at what temperature, okay? the higher the temperature, the shorter the cooking time. So in a food product, I mean, the time and temperature relationship is very, very critical. But too high temperature, I mean, is not useful either because we get the product burned. Say, I mean, typically when we bake some product, what's the temperature we use? Anywhere between, say, 180, 170 degree to 200 some degree. But very, very seldom do we produce, I mean, do we bake anything over 250 degree. Very, very unusual because typically, I mean, the food product will be cooked, well burned outside and then still raw inside. And because baking is indirect heating. Broiling is direct heating. So the direct heating, the cooking time, I mean, the temperature of course, is very high, but the time is very short, maybe a minute or two. So I mean, so when you set up the specification, you need to specify, okay, exactly. I mean, is it baking or broiling? I mean, if it's baking, I mean, usually it will be 200 some degree or lower. For a longer period of time, it could. I mean, you can. The lower the temperature, the longer the time. I mean, you can bake something. I mean, for hours. I mean, 2, 3, 4 hours. But the temperature is usually pretty low. I mean, it may be only 120 degree Fahrenheit. Centigrade. I mean, but if you say cook it, I mean, 200 some degree centigrade for 4 or 5 hours. I mean, the product likely depends on the size. I mean, it's going to get burned and caramelized. So you need to be very precise, and I mean, because the time and temperature affects the product outcome significantly. Okay, of course, you also need to have a specification of the finished product as a standard. I mean, so that you know if the product is acceptable or not. I mean, batch after batch. I need to watch out of the time and making sure, I mean, I do not go over. So that's the reason I turn my head to watch my clock. Okay, so more importantly, instead of getting all the steps, I mean, I just cover the more critical step. Among all the steps, I mean, in the beginning, we talk about you need a concept, you need a gold standard, and also, I mean, scaling up is also very important because typically, I mean, a bench test sample in the laboratory is going to be very different than produced in a pilot plant, a production trial. So in a food application, usually you start making a laboratory sample to begin with, then pilot plant, production trial, and actual production. And every step, I mean, there will be some differences. The ability to know what the product will be, I mean, will be like, I mean, in the actual production, in commercial batches, I mean, it's very important. That will guide you, I mean, the very beginning during the product formulation part. Say, for example, like you say, example again, if we were to make chicken noodle soup, okay, and if you produce in a laboratory and cooking just on the stove top, of course, I mean, the chicken will be very tough. So if you know, hey, in a pilot plant, I mean, or in production, I mean, you go through high temperature processing under pressure, the meat is going to get tender. So you select the right material. You also have the anticipation. It's okay. I mean, this laboratory sample is the chicken meat a little bit tough. But if I were, I mean, to produce in a laboratory, I mean, in the factory, the product will be texture will be more acceptable, and the taste will be different too. A lot of times when we taste the product right after conduct the experiment, it's very, very different than tasting the product. Say 2, 3, 4, 5 days, I mean, after processing, particularly say for canned product. When you get the product out from the retorts, usually they smell, they actually smell like, I mean, burned. I mean, have what we call overcooked taste. But I mean, if you allow it to temper 3, 4 days, then you know, I mean, the product is acceptable or not. But of course, experience helps. If you already know today, when the product is freshly produced, this kind of burnt taste is acceptable, you kind of overlook it. And but of course, if it's too much, then you know, hey, I mean, that's excessive. I mean, then you need to know how to eliminate that. So in all this area, experience helps. So the equipment design, I mean, and the factory design, It's very important. I mean, every piece of equipment is different. Say, I mean, for example, if you're talking about mixer, I mean, there are all kinds of mixer. Rather it's a vertical mixer or planetary mixer, horizontal mixer. Oh, you name it, there are many, many mixer. And even with, I mean, say horizontal mixer or vertical mixer, and different brand names designed differently. So you need to know and then give you different product outcome. And of course, the factory design. No factory is the same. As I said earlier, while I was working for Kraft, I work on barbecue sauce, and the product is produced in several locations. These are all, I mean, Kraft, I mean, factory. But every location is different because not 4 plants are all, I mean, constructed at the same time. So, and just the length of the pipe, require different pump size, I mean, and therefore the product outcome will be different. And many times, I mean, the barbecue sauce is not just produced in the United States. In the case of Kraft, it's produced in Canada, in other countries. So of course you can tell. I mean, every country is even more different. And you look at Coca-Cola, it's produced all over the world, and every location is different. It's very, very difficult to be exactly identical. It's no different, like McDonald's restaurant. I mean, every restaurant, there may be some variation. You'll be impossible exactly the kitchen design exactly identical. I mean, it may be a little bit smaller, a bit bigger. The equipment, I mean, they say the fry, the boiler, it may be a little bit, I mean, the newer generation, the older generation, different model. I mean, some of the restaurants, they're older, some of those are newer. And so all these, I mean, require tests to confirm whatever processing condition established in one location or as provided to you can be replicated or not, or with some minor modification, or in some cases, major modifications. So it's very important to do that. Okay, the variability, I know the differences, okay? And you also need to order the sufficient quantity when you do the trial run. Minimum usually is 3 times. There's always saying, if something can go wrong, it will go wrong. And typically, I mean, in the least anticipated manner, least anticipated situation. So always prepare for that. I mean, do not just order sufficient ingredient on the quantity you need to make the run. I mean, always order sufficient, 2-3 times more, because the cost of shipping oftentimes is greater than the raw material itself. And most importantly, it takes time too. If you don't have sufficient quantity, then you have to start over again. I mean, the time spent to order, to get delivered, I mean, can be weeks of time, particularly in today's COVID-19. It can take months of time to get delivered. Some of the ingredient may be coming from United States, from Europe, I mean, from Australia, say you are in Asia, and therefore try to use local ingredients as much as possible to save shipping costs as well as time. So when you do product development, I mean, always remember the difference between large-scale production and laboratory bench products. Use only commercially available ingredients. A lot of the ingredient which is available, in supermarket, is not commercially available. Okay, and what is commercially, what is being done at home many times cannot be commercially done in a factory. Okay, and even it can be done, I mean, you won't deliver the same outcome. Most importantly, I mean, food is a highly regulated product, and hopefully you don't run into this situation. But for safety reason, okay, every ingredient must be traceable, so that if in case there's some problem with the product, you know where to retrieve the product for safety reason. As I said again, food itself is highly regulated. I mean, rather it's just a piece of egg or soda or butter or ice cream. They're highly regulated, okay, because they have something called standard identity. I mean, there's a law that requires ice cream to contain certain fat content, etc., etc. Some of those laws may be outdated, but still, being used, so you need to be aware of it. You're producing ice cream with only 1% fat, you cannot call ice cream, okay, and then you waste all your time. And then, more importantly too, I mean, and food safety is also very important, as I mentioned. So everything you must prepare for the worst in case the product is not acceptable. You need to retrieve them. I mean, what are you going to do? I mean, so you need to record keeping. You need a lot number. I mean, batch number, all those things. Consider seasonality of raw material. I mean, strawberry is available year round in supermarket, but does not mean it's available commercially year-round basis. The strawberry used at home for eating, what we call table use, is different than the strawberry used to make strawberry jam and jellies and things like that. And of course, the cost, I mean, is fluctuates quite a bit, I mean, on the retail side. But for, I mean, commercially basis, we sign contract, okay, and maybe entire year supply, the price is fixed. We cannot afford. Today is $1 a pound of strawberry, and tomorrow is, I mean, $1.20 or 95 cents. It must be constant. For home use, it doesn't matter. Hey, I mean, a dime or more, I mean, difference in kilo. But commercially, when you buy tons and tons of product, I mean, a dime here, I mean, 10 cents more here and there, or less, I mean, can be a lot of differences. The bottom line, these are the profits. Consider MOQ, minimum order quantity, shipping time, logistics. We talked about that already. I mean, when you order ingredient for production, and
you can ignore that. Yeah, it's just a poll I've launched for the audience.
Okay. All right. Oops, I forgot. The train of thought.
Minimum order quantities.
Oh, yeah. See, I'm getting older. Darn it. Okay. Minimum order quantity. And Dave, as I said, I mean, when you do trial run, and you need to order sufficient quantity. And because, I mean, typically you can order, hey, I want 500 gram, 1 kg, 2 kg, 5 kg. Many times it's 100 kg, depends on ingredient, or 1,000 kg. And the shipping cost actually costs a lot more many times by air freight. I mean, if you don't have enough, so you're in a rush, I mean, then the ingredient itself, I mean, typically like flavors and things like that. You also keep in mind about the process. You use only a process that can be adopted in factory. I mean, if you are using a process that is not replicable or applicable in commercial basis, is useless again. Establish manufacturing specification and know the shelf life. Okay, another thing is, I mean, for most startup, majority of the time, you're not going to be producing the product yourself. I mean, a startup company, I mean, first of all, you have a budget and spend all your resources on equipment. I mean, is unwise. Even if your budget allows you to do that, it's still not a good way to do so for many reasons. One of the reasons is, I mean, if you order new equipment, it takes time. A new piece of equipment, unless they're very simple, typically take anywhere from a month to 3 months to 6 months. When I work for Heinz, I mean, we work on a line of frozen pizza. The pizza machine that produce, I mean, that actually, I mean, drop the ingredients on the pizza crust as well as others. Those are automated. I mean, it produces about 100 pizza each minute, and that is highly sophisticated and custom designed for application. And that equipment takes over 6 months to get it delivered. I mean, and of course, it takes a month or two to get it ordered and designed. And once it's produced, you need to try it out and then send to a factory and try again. So just the equipment itself takes easily 9 months for something a little bit more sophisticated. Okay, so what I'm trying to say is, I mean, for most of you, due to reason of cost and experience and time, I mean, likely you will be using a contract packer. So when you deal with contract packer, you need to be keenly aware about what you're facing, what you must do, and what are the roles and what are the responsibility of the contract packer and yourself. Okay, and that, I mean, when you're ready to produce a product, of course, you also need to remember there's a liability. Just like driving a car, there's in an unlikely event, you may run into an accident, whether it's a fault or not, you need your insurance. So when you produce a product for sale to the consumer, okay, you need to have liability insurance, okay, very, very important. And you need to engage the contract packer as early as you can, dealing, and sometimes even before, I mean, you actually start working. As I said, we don't know how you process a product and start developing a product development is a waste of resources and time. And a lot of times you start engaging the contract packer during the concept stage. When you have a concept, I mean, you want to move on, you usually have some idea about how to produce a product and who is going to produce for you. And because some of the concept, it may be very valid, very attractive, very beneficial. But on the other hand, if no one can produce for you at a cost-attractive basis, then that concept is, I mean, is no longer valid anymore. You cannot produce a product continuously when you keep losing money. Okay, and so you want to get engaged as soon as you can. I mean, during the concept stage. That means for many of you start up, I mean, you can the idea, you already should know who is going to produce for you now, and now. Okay, and you want to know the expertise and the background of these contract packers. And at the very end, the expenses, nothing's free. Who's going to pay for it? How does it work? I mean, do they take care of the ingredient for you, all the ingredient for you, everything, or you have to take care of that yourself? So there's a different way of handling contract packer on the cost itself. Is it on a cost plus basis, whatever it costs, plus a margin for them, or you provide everything, they only do the, I mean, the manufacturing part itself, okay? And you have to allow them to make profit. And no one stay in business, I mean, to lose money. And that many times the calculation you set aside for those cost benefit costs is way below the normal norm. And therefore you are producing a product which you will never be profitable. It's similar to like Uber or like Grab, I mean, on the car sharing. I mean, they're still not profitable. And that's the reason that their stocks are depressed, I mean, these days, I mean, because, I mean, they overestimate, optimistic about, I mean, the profit, they paint a too rosy picture. Of course, today, I mean, the COVID-19 doesn't help the situation. A lot of people working from home, I mean, a lot of deliveries being made, however, I mean, so they offset some of the losses they have. So cost is very important. Make sure your business model does, I mean, a financial model does generate profit for you, at least longer term. Okay, contract packing, you need to consider location, manufacturing, registration. Make sure the manufacturer has public registration, licensing, public expertise.
Quick break for a minute.
The contract packer, I mean, and the expertise, the cost, I mean, all need to be figured out. And more importantly, I mean, check on the food safety record. Do not only let them control the agenda. Do not let them show you what they have. Do not only look at what they give to you. Look at things of which, I mean, you think is important and ask for it. They're not going to show you record or any, I mean, fines, I mean, for food safety violation if you don't ask for it. Okay, this is very important. Okay, and I mean, if they have any violation of food safety issues, and if indeed, if the product later on, there's some, I mean, some problem with food safeties. For example, I mean, you need to be recalled, etc., etc. Who's responsible for it? You see, you or they, depends if the product recipe or the processing. Now, typically, I mean, if the product has been run for many, many months, and then it's a cost plus basis, if there's any problem, usually it's their fault. But if it's a new product without any history, it could be your fault because the product is not well designed, etc., etc. So you need to know, I mean, and have this draft by a lawyer, put in writing. Do not do everything by handshake, okay? And everything needs to be spelled out. You, unless you are a specialized lawyer in business law, do not have the proper skill nor knowledge to write up, I mean, a contract packer agreements with proper terms. So really important you use the right people to help you to guide along your journey to success as a startup company. The role of contract packer, I mean, entire logistic from raw material sources, storage, distribution. The contract packer, the co-packer's role is to make money for themselves. Okay, business is business. The interest is for themselves only. Of course, for them to make money, they want you to be successful, but the ultimate responsibility is their own business. Your success is not their primary concern, okay? They want to cut corners logically, as long as the product is safe. I mean, to produce a product that is, I mean, deliver the greatest profit. And you, just the opposite, okay? You want to pay them the least amount. It's no different between you as a car buyer and when you go out to a car dealer. I mean, the car dealer's responsibility is different than yours. They want to make as much money, the car dealer, but you want to pay as little money. You want great services. They want to deliver services of which cost them the least, okay, et cetera, et cetera. At the very end, you are at the end of the totem pole. As a start company, you are all by yourself. No one is going there to coach you step by step every time. So how to, I mean, when you deal with contract packer, how to control confidentiality, the legal issues, and things like that. Now the thing is, I mean, you're at a loss when you deal with contract packing because, I mean, to produce a product for you, you have to give them the ingredients, right, et cetera, et cetera. And they produce them for you is their equipment. Of course, they have to know exactly working with you to define the process. So I told you already, process is the most critical part in a product development cycle. So how can you protect yourself? Okay. So they know everything. They know the processing, they know the packaging. There's no secret, okay, compared to outsiders, I mean, of which they don't know. So they know these two critical areas already. So the only thing left is the product formulation, right? So you're pretty much at their mercy, basically, okay? You are kind of a victim, I mean, in front of them. Their role is how to take advantage of you, okay? So quite disappointing to hear that, right? So you want to protect yourself. They try to minimize disclosing the formulation as much as you can. There's only so much you can do at the end of the day. I mean, you want to find someone, a contract packer, that is eagerly willing to work with you, and that, I mean, they believe you deliver, I mean, something unique to them. It's always to keep in mind, in any business relationship, we always look at who is more important. Are you more important than they are? Or they are more important than you? Say, for example, if you are Coca-Cola, they don't produce Coca-Cola that much themselves, okay? They go through a bottling companies, I mean, Coca-Cola Enterprises, so it's contract out, okay? Some of those are being direct subsidiaries, some are not, okay? But if you supply items for McDonald's, supply items for Coca-Cola as a contract packer, I mean, McDonald's, they use all contract packers. They don't hardly produce anything on their own. They develop product and they have their contract out to others. So how does McDonald's protect themselves? Well, to McDonald's, it's not that critical because, I mean, McDonald's business is large enough to sustain the business of the contract packer. Okay, so the contract packer need them more than McDonald's need them, right? Because of the brand name and the sales volume and the reputation. When you are contract packer for McDonald's, you kind of, I mean, other people say, gee, you already packed the product for McDonald's. Can't be too bad. So it's like free advertisement. But for startup company, you are no one. You are nothing. You are nothing. You are nothing. You are just a victim. You are just a prey in front of them. Okay, hate to tell you that. So as a result, you need to do everything to protect yourself by using premixes and to consider anything if it's unique to patent that as much as you can, which is going to be very difficult, but at least it's one option. Okay. So when you do trial run, I mean, it's a combined effort. Okay, a lot of times people just ill prepared as a start company when they go to a contract packer. I mean, they don't really know what's expected. Again, at their mercy. The easiest victim is someone which is ill prepared. They don't even know what they're talking about. I mean, many times the company. Okay, so you need to have, I mean, schedule run well in advance. Talk to them ahead of time what you expect. I mean, make sure everything is there before you do the run. And so you have a meeting, I mean, before the trial. When you conduct a trial, you should be well organized. Who is going to do what? Okay, what area you have to pay attention to? Okay, as well as, I mean, after the trial run, then you need to have a post-trial meeting. Okay, summarize the outcome, evaluate the product, what need to be changed, what has been done right, what has been done wrong, and what are the next steps. Keep people involved. Do not keep everything secret. Secrets lead to failures, okay? Because no one knows everything. You must be willing to share with others. As I told you already, they already are master over you already. They know almost everything about you. I mean, in the processing, in packaging, the only little thing you may be able to protect yourself is just the recipe. So do as much as you can in the area, but still you need to share with people about how to make the product the way you want it to be, the final product. So control cost very important. Okay, have a co-manufacturing, I mean, contract packing agreement signed. Seek legal advices. Seek legal advices. Seek help on this. Understand confidentiality fully. I mean, per day. I mean, is the cost charged on per day basis or per unit basis? Okay. Depends how you structure that. I mean, talk to the lawyer and figure that out. I mean, figure out together what's the best way to protect you to reduce your cost. Know your yield. 100 pound of product, 100 kg of product. The batch weight, is it going to be 100 pound, 100 kg coming out? Probably not. Okay, you need to know your yield losses. Okay, is it 2%, 3%? The industry, ideally 1%. If you however, a startup, you have small batches, your yield loss can be 10, 15%, particularly when you do only one batch because you need to clean up, I mean, or fill out the pipe and things like that. Okay, you have to know it early. Otherwise, if the yield actually is I mean, 99%, but you think it's only 95%. So who's going to benefit from that? If the contract packer is ethical, so they will share the information with you. Hey, I mean, our yield actually is higher, so reduce your cost. But many times, some unscrupulous, I mean, contract packer, they may keep it themselves. And so, I mean, instead, I mean, if the yield is higher, instead of making 10 batches, I mean, they may only need to make 9 batches, etc., etc. But there are ways to protect yourself. We don't have time to go into details. But what I'm saying is you have to protect yourself. You have to know what you're doing. I mean, the more you know about your product, the better it is. So make sure you have reliable supply, I mean, logistic, I mean, chain, I mean, supply chain, and so that, I mean, there's no hurdles over there because, I mean, if your supply chain is properly managed, I mean, your shipping time, all those things can get messed up, okay? Pay attention, your cash flow is a killer. when you start making production, before you actually collect the revenue, have any revenue, you have a lot of outlay on ordering ingredients. You have to pay the contract packer before you get the money back from selling, etc., etc. So you must be careful about your account payable, account receivable, etc., etc. And in the very beginning, you need to have a sufficient cash cushion on this. So you need to know your cost at the beginning, not afterwards. And most start company which I work with, they really, really forget this important area. They don't pay enough attention or understand correctly or estimate that correctly. So you must know your cost at the very beginning. When you have the concept already, know where you produce it and know your cost. Again, estimate, need to be finalized, give you enough cushion. And this, of course, experience helps. Okay, and hard to price, higher than the real. And one thing to remember is really hard to price, higher than real meat. I will use an analogy. A lot of times right now, plant-based food, is priced higher than real meat. This cannot be, it's not sustainable. And it's not going to be mass scalable, okay? The price is coming down very rapidly. No update your cost regularly. Your yesterday's cost is yesterday, today's cost will be different. Simple TV tape mixture is commodity product with global supplies, price dropping very fast. And therefore, you must have planned to counter this ultimate event. You have to prepare in advance. Hey, if the cost is say $1 a kg, this is my GP, gross profit. And if the price drop down, 80 cents a kg, do I still make money? Is it enough? So you always have to plan in advance. Prepare for alternative and other options. Don't get caught by surprise. The more you're prepared, the better you're prepared, the more you're able to deal with these problems when it pops up. Okay, now I use this example. This is an article. You know what? This happened to be in India. This outfit is in India. I don't want to name the outfit, but it's published on September 15th, that means only a few days ago, in a Food Navigator, maybe a week ago or so, okay? And he said over here, this startup company owner, he's very proud of it, and rightly so, okay? He said the burger patties currently retail at THB 75, I think it's Thai, okay, Thai baht, and or US 240 per patty, which is less than half the price of the Beyond Burger patty, Thailand, which goes for about $11. So what he's saying is that for 2 patties. So what he's saying is that, in Thailand, each patty is about $5, right? $5.50 or so, $5.40 or so, and he is selling at $2.40. Wow, of course, great. And this is only a few days old. Well, what do you think? You think he did enough homework or planned in advance sufficiently? Here in the United States, in Costco, just like Walmart, is a warehouse store, $1.875, $1.87 each. And he is selling at $2.40 each. Ouch, yuck. Okay, this is the price, $14.99 per 8 pieces. Okay, this is the April. This is in September. What then? What are you going to do? Now, of course, this is Thailand. This is in US. But you think this difference will be forever acceptable? Eventually, people is going to sell the product, buy the product beyond the United States and ship it to Thailand and sell it yourself. Maybe you are going to do that instead of start a company making your own product. You may as well be a distributor and buy this here in Costco and keep shipping it to Thailand, make a bundle, right? My goodness, I will consider that. So what happens when you have this kind of cost model? You are not going to survive. Okay, this is ill-prepared. You did not do your homework properly. Okay, so product disposition, what do you do with the trial product? Okay, trial product many times cannot be sold because, you don't have the right label as well, the issues, et cetera, et cetera. So what are you going to do with it? You need to think about it. Throw away or keep a portion or keep all of them or to do shelf life tests, et cetera, et cetera. What do you do, before a product can be made for sale? You have to understand that. Again, food is a highly regulated product. You must know all of them. Before you do anything as applicable to your product. Oops. Okay, now I think I'm going to be short on time, so I really want to give you guys 30 minutes to ask questions. So I think I have 3 more slides. Okay, and
I think we can cover those. Yeah, we can cover those in about 15 minutes, and then we can have we have few questions, so we can take them in the last 15 minutes.
Okay. Got it. I do it quickly. Sorry about that. Now, what are the most common mistakes amongst our company? The most important mistake, of which you can help to avoid, is know what you don't know. No one knows everything. I don't know a lot of things. I don't know more things about what I know than what I don't know. However, in general, I know what I don't know. What I don't know, I can ask for help. Okay. The problem is a lot of startup company, they don't know what they don't know. Then they don't even know where to ask questions, where to seek help. And many times, when they don't know what they don't know, they feel overconfident. They think they have every solutions. They have every problem, every question answered. But however, in general, majority of startup companies, the biggest pitfall, the biggest problem they have, they don't even know their weaknesses. They don't know what they don't know. Okay. And therefore resulting in underestimated challenges and realistic timetable. They thought everything done is so easy. Today they develop a product, 2 months later, the product will be out in the market. Of course, it's not doable, okay, just to get approval many times, okay. Excessive confidence, overly optimistic, ill prepared for pitfalls, okay. Food business highly regulated. Many times they don't even know what the regulations are, okay. And again, this relates to they don't know what they don't know. Okay, and it's a lot better. It's okay. You don't know something, but you know what you don't know is a lot better than you don't know what you don't know. Okay, it sounds simple, but most of us, particularly young entrepreneurs, rightly so, they don't have the experience. And therefore they don't know what question may be, what problem may be. And this is the reason you are here participating in this workshop, try to know more, prepare yourself, learn from others, be a good listener. Talk to more people, connect with more people. Not able to fully comprehend the importance of effect, process, and packaging. We talked about that already. They always focus on recipe, thinking recipe is the God, okay, which is the least important part. Unable to set priorities and commit to it. Typically, shifting target, moving timetable. Today we do this, tomorrow we do that. Okay, every day is different. So whatever get done yesterday is not going to be useful tomorrow. That happens again and again. I want to emphasize again, recipe is not important. I'm not suggesting you should publish that on newspaper about what your product recipe is. Certainly not, okay? It doesn't make sense. But on the other hand, do not look at recipe. As the only thing of which is critical to product success. The more successful factors, those are processing and packaging. Okay, there's no adequate planning of cushions. Because they don't know what they don't know, therefore, ill prepared. So the timetable tend to be overly optimistic. And so they don't have enough cushions, financially speaking, and time-wise. However, if you know what you don't know, this can be avoided. When you don't know what you don't know, when the timetable is not realistic, you tend to scramble. When you scramble things, you're ill prepared for that. It's going to be increasing your failure rate. Okay, a lot of times startup companies tend to be egotistic. Okay, they are not likely to be good listeners. They feel that, hey, how do you start a business? By itself, of course, it's not easy. It is a lot of challenges. They have done a lot of good things already. But because of that, they feel overconfident. They feel they know the world. They know everything. They know what to do. They have everything under the control. the reality is what they know is only a small percentage what need to be get accomplished. A lot of these star company, the founders, they tend to be really autocratic, okay? Their way of doing things is the only way to do things. My way is the only way. Your way is to listen to my way. And that is particular with micromanagement, okay? They tend to look over the shoulder of people. And I hope you guys will avoid that. A lot of founders, among many of you, you may have various kind of skill set, different talents. Some of those may be studied food science. Some of those may not have studied food science, maybe business degree, engineering degree, or whatever degree, biology degree, psychology degree. But you have a great idea, and that's good, great, okay? So, however, trust your people, and you got to believe in your people. If you don't have the food science background, and you start telling people how to develop food product, what the ingredients are supposed to be, and that is the only way to do it, you think it will be successful? However, no doubt you have accomplished a lot already. By all means, share your opinion, share your comment, share your suggestion with others, and let the true expert in that particular area to make decision, to execute properly. I mean, and allow yourself to focus an area on which you have true competency, true, core competency on that. And many times, founders, they tend to be very subjective. They are, because they feel overconfidence. Their way is the only way. They are opinionated and they have irrational expectation. They're very bossy. No matter what you do, it's not good enough for them. Okay, the more you achieve, you have achieved in your life, typically the more modest you are. You are still young. I cannot believe how much more you can get accomplished for most of the founders. You have 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So by all means, there's a lot of things you can get done. Believe in others, trust others. The more you trust others, the better, the more you can get accomplished in life. Okay, and give people a chance to make mistakes. Okay, and many times they think themselves they're the boss. They don't even set a good example, exemplify themselves at work. Many times they're not punctual. Because everything they do is their only priority. Everything else is not priority. They're late because they always say that I have other things to do. Lack of professionalism. Okay, backpicking is their holistic approach. They focus on the weaknesses. They focus on what is done wrong instead of focusing on what has been accomplished, what has been done by the team, what they have done helping you to get achieved. But instead of, hey, you haven't done this, you have not done that, that is not going to be successful to lead a team as a good manager. Because at the end of the day, success is a team effort. Always blame yourself if it's not successful and give credit to your team members. We all know that when the team is successful, you are the one that harvest, that reap the most benefit. You don't have to glorify yourself. That everything is because of you. Trust the wrong person. You got to hear what the founders want to hear, but not what needs to hear. A lot of times founders are surrounded by a group of advisors, a group of consultants, a group of knowledgeable, good people. Okay, but however, there's always a tendency for the founders to hear what they want to hear, but not what they need to hear. Most people would not be there's no need for them to tell you what you must know, but they only tell you what you want to hear. And if you have this kind of culture at work, you'll never be successful. People tend to give you a flattery word, tell you what you want to hear. Remember, do not only listen to what people told you in the past, what people are telling you now, but more importantly, watch the subtle things. Watch what people is not telling you. Use your body, watch people's body language. Watch all the subtle body language and body sign. That's even more important. In a professional business world, hardly anyone will tell you, hey, you are no good, you are screwed up, you are crazy. People always tell you in a polite way. People give you praise doesn't mean that really come from the heart. Be careful, okay? Use good judgment. Okay, when people tell you you do a good job, I mean, in all likelihood, you will do a good job. But when people don't say anything, usually this is a bad situation. Usually, this is something very bad already. Okay, no time to do things right the first time, but have time to fix it. I mean, everything is, oh, I'm in rush, and then anytime there's a mistake, you blame others, right? But instead do things right, the right thing right the first time. No money, no time to do things right. But when there's a problem, they always find time. They always, okay, I mean, let's delay this, let's do this later, etc., etc. However, that's not the way to do things. Lack of documentation. Everything is by oral. Okay, conversation instead of putting things in record. So that mistake made today, tomorrow will happen again a month later because there's no record of it. Okay, keeping documentation required by food safety, by HACCP program, I mean by law. Okay, and secondary also minimize mistake by asking you, whenever you put things in writing, it's going to take a little bit more time. So you go through a thinking process and minimize mistake. Lack of focus, I mean, tend to be irrational, I mean, and typically imitational. They do things to copy others. They are not really that innovative. Of course, there are exceptions, particularly food recipe. Very, very seldom you have a unique IT advantages, of which, I mean, if you don't have a good concept to begin with. And most importantly, refuse to acknowledge mistake made and thus never learn the mistakes made. Okay, it's okay to make mistakes, but acknowledge the mistakes. Take the mistake graciously instead of finding scapegoat who made the mistake. Find some way to avoid making the same mistake again. Instead, spending time who make it, but instead understand why you make it and how to prevent from happening. Okay, so trend versus fact. Always focus on the when you work on the concept, always focus on the idea itself is the trend. And most of the time, typically a lot of these, I mean, sometimes find that they get overindulged and they have a great idea to begin with, so probably it's a trend. But later on, many of these ideas, after ideas, they become a fact. Okay, so trend is a long term, rather short term. Okay, trend usually, I mean, have a scientific explanation. For example, like plant-based food because, I mean, it's healthier, sustainable. I mean, from a health, as well as, I mean, other ecological items. I mean, things like that. And therefore, you can explain that. There's some justification. A fat, for example, today, by searching maybe narrow collar, tomorrow longer, bigger, larger collar, maybe today's for ladies. The skirt today, the length is above the knee, and tomorrow maybe longer. All those is just subjective. There's no expectation. It's just the designer wants to generate sales, like men's tie, I mean, wider and narrower, etc., etc. So as a result, when there's no scientific explanation, those usually cannot stay long. I mean, people keep checking mind, okay, but I mean, etc., etc. So you tend to, I mean, with a fad, you tend to do a hearsay, okay. Hey, because oh, I see a long line, I mean, waiting for this, I mean, drink, so that must be good. Let's go there and wait for it. But there's no reason for that. And typically, I mean, a fad is over-exaggerated, overreacted. I mean, everyone, I mean, suddenly go there, hurt feeling, okay, but there's no staying power. So when we work on concept, we always work on trend instead of focusing on fact. Look at long term or profit on everything we do. So what are the future trends? And I think that the future trends is do not focus on low-hanging fruits. That is already done, overcrowded. Look at things of which is truly unique, okay, using a different material. Today's trend, I mean, a lot of this plant-based food, they just use a mixture of different ingredients. Those are really getting very old, overcrowded. Too many people working on that already. I mean, imitation, I mean, chicken, pork, all those things, like a ground beef and ground pork, whatnot. I mean, ground chicken, fish, whatnot. I mean, a mixture of TVP as well, plain ingredient. Those are getting very old and stale. It's no longer, I mean, there's too much competition. You will not be successful over a long-term basis. Do something different. You want to develop something truly mimic the animal-based counterpart with superior organic, I mean, organic little attribute, including texture. It's not easy. I mean, this few items, everyone said they can do it, but it's not that easy. I mean, if you can do that, I mean, good for you. I mean, of course, we need to focus on health, long-term, nutrition, sustainability focus. Focusing on the protein quality, not just quantity, and how it's digest, make sure the amino acid profile is good. More value added, convenient plant-based food, move further away from commodity type product. Majority of today's product, plant-based product, they're grounded. Those are not value added. They're not really that convenient. Besides, just make up from plants. And whatever is easy for you to replicate, whatever, you only take a few months of time to do R&D work, in all likelihood, it is not sustainable. Those are commodity. You want to look, while you're generating revenue and have to have this the low-hanging fruits, available for sale, you need to start looking for long-term, something truly have IT, unique properties, allow you to stand out. Okay, otherwise today's success will indeed turn into tomorrow's failure. So overall, what's the food trend? The food should be an alternative to medicine. Very, 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 very important. We should not look at food as something just to fill up the tummy. You should, by eating correctly, by you developing a product properly, looking at the concern of the of health and the nutritional aspect. We should, say for example, a product with functional properties. Food can be substitute for medicine. A lot of ingredients they are. For example, particularly in Chinese medicine, the herbs and things like that have medicinal effect. Something as simple as garlic, onion, chili pepper, curry, they all have functional effect. Use this ingredient as much as you can when you do formulation in order to produce a product that could help to minimize illness and diseases. Okay, plant should be looked at as alternative protein sources. Okay, more specifically. Okay, and instead of from animal source, we should look at from plant source, a complement of plants, not just from soybean and things like that. Wholesome food should be looked at as alternative junk food. Junk food is junk food. Don't disguise junk food. Just because from plants, even though plant-based is still a little bit better. Junk food, the animal junk food, as Shardul just mentioned earlier. Okay, and responsibility alternative to food scandal, very, very important. You as a startup company, whatever you do, make sure you pay attention social responsibility. We, as human beings, need to take care of others, need to take care of the future generations, need to pay attention to food safety. If you do not have social responsibility, you don't have responsibility for others, you don't feel the need for humanity and humility, then no doubt food scandal will come to haunt you for life. All right, with that in mind, I think I did it. Okay, even though maybe a little bit longer than I thought, but thank you so much for your attention. And I hope you benefit from today's discussion. And we have a few minutes to open for any question you may have in mind. Feel free to do so.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alfred. First of all, I think this was a great presentation. That is exactly what we were looking for candidates to kind of get a lot of practical perspective on a lot of things that they've been theoretically studying till now. And I think the polls, I'm just going to quickly share the results, indicate that 90% of the people found the session very, very useful to, their proposals, their ideas, and to improve their solutions. More than 90% actually people found 80% of the content more than useful. And then there were people who had almost 83% of the people found the knowledge shared in today's webinar, all the insights that you shared, as something to be new that they had not previously heard before. So these are great numbers, and I'm really happy that people have really learned so much from this session. And
thank you. But at the same time, to be honest with you guys, I feel honored to be here to sharing my experience with you. But more importantly, I still haven't reached the ultimate goal, 100% perfection. Okay, there's still room for me to improve, and I appreciate your thoughtful comment. And every time, I just told one of my colleagues, today, And I said that as much as I've been teaching for 20, 30 years already. And today's presentation, webinar, I still have butterflies in my tummy. I woke up at 5 o'clock this morning and I go through my PowerPoint, one more time, even though I did it 24 hours ago, because I feel it's an obligation. I'm indeed very honored to be here. And I hope I will do better. And I count on myself to do better next time.
Thank you so much for that humbling perspective, Alfred. Just goes on to kind of state that no matter how much you've refined your proposals before the 25th, there's always a chance for you to work on it and improve it before you submit it. Just quickly pitching in our deadline there so that you don't forget and ask for an extension. But having said that, we can actually go and take a quick look at some of the questions we've received. You can also see them in the Q&A section. I can just read out to them for you. You can also take a look at it and then we'll go from top to bottom, right? Can you throw some insights on the minimum scale that is usually recommended for scaling up of product processing line, since it's a fairly novel area for some of the tasks, isolates, protein isolates of some ingredients, and even the machine infrastructure in India is kind of rare when you look at high moisture extruders, protein isolation equipments. So should greater focus be given to try novel ways and implementing them to the best of its ability? Or you should look at the costs involved and probably go for an inferior process. So you can give us some, general insights on choosing quality and versus, subpar process maybe, and how those things can affect a startup's success in the long run.
Now, I think in this, it depends on the type of product you're trying to get into. If it's a really novelty product, the sales volume probably will be small to begin with. Say for example, you're working on chicken nuggets or beef patty, those are large scale. So with larger scale, the larger audience, your batch size will be bigger. If your batch size say is only 100 kg, 200 kg, you're going to produce, when eventually you need tons of product. So your batch size, if it's too small, you will be producing a lot of these batches. So, but on the other hand, if it's a cultivated meat, say example, okay, those, it's going to take time to have a large market. So the batch size will be smaller. 100 kg may be acceptable. So I guess, the batch size depends on, the type of product category you are trying to focus in. And also, the capability of the control packer. Some control, typically, you want to make a big batch, as big as you can afford. As big a batch, that is, doable in the factory or the customer demand. The reason for that, smaller batches give you too much variation because every small batch, your ingredient weight is very small, so it's subject to greater experimental errors. And more importantly too, smaller batches, there's batch-to-batch variations. So the smaller batches, the more batches you have to make for the given quantity you need, there will be greater variations. So instead of making, say, one batch of a ton, you make 10 batches of 100 kg. So the product quality and the cost, of course, making one batch of 1 ton, 1,000 kg is better than 10 batches of 100 kg. So you want to do it like that. And most important too, know your customer. For a lot of customers, that is the supermarket chain or whatever, they dictate how many lot number they are going to accept. Too many batches require them to do too many tests if it's appropriate. So if in a shipment you send them 10 batches of product, that means they have to do 10. They are not going to allow it to happen. Typically, most companies allow you only no more than 1 or 2 lot number per shipment. Okay. Say if it's 1 ton, that means you only give them 1 or 2, lot number, because sometimes it's the end of one lot, the beginning of another lot. But if you're 10 lots, it's not useful. They will reject that. So consider these factors.
Thank you so much. That was a great perspective. So next question talks about, just to give you more context, this is an ideation challenge, right? You're not asking people to develop products because obviously there are not enough universities with the required infrastructure to do that. Also, scaling up is a big problem in India because of less availability of co-manufacturers and the other parts of the ecosystem that are usually necessary for a food startup to succeed. currently. So given that, checking the practicality of a process might not be feasible when it comes to finding ways to make a process sustainable, what criterion should be considered to check on its application? Is mere idea to make a particular process sustainable enough? Or in specific this context, if people are just ideating about sustainable processes and scale up, how can they think about these factors a little better?
Are you talking about this question? A question
Yes.
of scale up, this one?
Checking the practicality, the one at the top.
Okay, a question of scale up strategy, are you talking about this one?
No, the first one, checking the practicality of a process is not feasible. So the one I'm answering live.
Oh, okay. Well, yes and no. I do think that, I mean, oops. Can I get back to the question?
Yeah, you can find it in the answered questions.
Where's the question now?
Right next to you in answered questions. Yeah, I'll just copy it for you here. Okay, it cannot be copied. So if you click on answered, you can find it there, right next to open at the top in the Q&A button.
Yeah,
so
yeah. I mean, are you talking about the first question or second question?
Second question.
Okay, got it. Yes and no. Everything when we do, I mean, R&D work, you should put things under your control. If I understand your question correctly, it seems to me, of course, there's certain things out of your control, but you need to minimize that. The more you can turn things out of your control to within your control, the better it is for the outcome. Then you have a better, I mean, understanding about what the product will be. If indeed you choose a process which can, I mean, is out of your control, you're not too sure if that process can be done on an ongoing basis. That means, I mean, you have to do again and again every time you go to a new facility. You have to start over again the process. As I said earlier, process affect the product outcome. So you want to be as consistent and minimize variable as much as you can. Or else, I mean, you're going to mess up your cost, your product characteristics, and so on and so forth. So it's really important. When you first begin with in the concept stage, you should have some idea. Hey, is this product actually can be produced on a large scale basis, or at least, I mean, you have alternative plan. Okay, I mean, say, I mean, this process smaller scale is good for me for enough for a year, and then during this time, I mean, I'm going to look for another process that allow me to grow for the next 2 years, 3 years, etc., etc. You need to have a timetable like that. I don't know whether if I understand the question properly or answer it properly. Okay.
No worries. We can move on to the next question. It talks about life cycle analyses. You can see it in the open category, and I'm also sending it to you on chat. So Preeti basically asks, it's a valid point that LCA of the ingredient should be done, but it is feasible to conduct a LCA of, is it feasible to conduct a LCA of all the ingredients that a startup is using if the data is not available, especially like in our sector? Are there any theoretical ways to, predict LCA, or,
can you show me the question? I don't see the question.
Yes, so I have sent it to you in chat, and it's also in the open questions in the Q&A button.
Okay. What is LCA?
Life cycle analyses.
Okay, got it. Okay, now this is very important about, I mean, shelf life test and life cycle. First of all, on all the ingredients of which you purchase, the supplier will tell you how to handle the ingredient. What is the shelf life? Typical food ingredient depends on the volatility of the compound, how it's being sold to you. It could last, I mean, as long as, I mean, a year, but the minimum should be a few months of time. You can order ingredient unless there's a perishable. Otherwise, I mean, you can order ingredient that is only good for a month or two. So as a result, I mean, you use the information provided to you by reputable suppliers, and you do the shelf life test. Now, typically, I mean, when you do the shelf life test, again, experience helps. Say the flavor quality, quality, okay, and the vitamin minerals, potency. Typically, they deteriorate over a period of time. I work on a product, nutritional products, of which shelf life is very important. And the potency, the efficacy of these nutrients, they deteriorate over a period of time, over a year or two. So I always, with this knowledge based on experience as well as literature search, say I need to have 1,000 IU, of vitamin D at the end of the shelf life, say a year. And I know that, the curve, the deterioration curve, and I will, increase the amount in the very beginning to allow, a certain percent, say vitamin C, to get, eliminated, destroyed, or reduce, over a period of time. So you need to do shelf life test. In addition, for the supply as well as the finished product. Now, of course, when you have all the ingredients, there may be 10, 15 ingredients in the finished product, you always take the shortest, okay, shelf life, of the individual ingredient, and then, equate that in the final product, and then adjust, the shortest to balance it off at the very end. Of course, further, you can do a shelf life test. So if the shelf life test, if it's 1 year, you can do many products. Some product, not all the product can do, but certain product, you can do elevated temperature. That's the easiest thing. Instead of doing it at room temperature, say 20 degrees, you can do it at 40 degrees centigrade. Which is pretty common. 50 degrees may be a little bit too excessive. So that gives you a little bit leeway. For plant-based food, I would say, the minimum you have to consider, the turnaround time, from in distribution, and for non-perishable product, you need to have at least 3 months, 3 to 6 months. Particularly United States, again, depends on country. A product in Hong Kong or Singapore can be a bit shorter because the distribution time, logistics. But United States, you'll be very, very difficult for refrigerated product to have shelf life less than a month or two, ideally 2 months minimum.
Got it. Actually, the question also had an element of life cycle analysis. So Varun, would you like to add any perspective here?
Yeah, so life cycle analysis is, of course, the idea of examining the sustainability in terms of the inputs versus the outputs of any particular process, especially things like energy, water use, etc.
Where's the question again? I'm sorry. Where's the question again?
Sorry, it's in, yeah, go ahead.
It's went to the answered section. It's in the answered section, answered tab. So I'll just send it to you as well on chat.
Okay.
Yeah. So the thing to note about all of this stuff is that life cycle analyses tend to be very specific to the specific product. So if you look at, for example, GFI has a white paper that we can send to you if you like, but it's called Plant-Based Meat for a Growing World, which analyzes specific LCAs that have been put out by specific plant-based meat products, and therefore offers a range of how much better plant-based meat is compared to traditional animal-based meat. But you can only really offer that range. Obviously, the range is still much better overall, but it is a range because it's very specific to specific products. So it's important to note that whatever your ingredient providers are, if they don't have those life cycle analyses available, you'll have to estimate what the life cycle analysis is or what the sustainability implications are. It's very difficult to do that on the whole, but you can find general data on things like soy, pea, wheat, etc.
Now, that's a great point. I did not realize, that GFI have resources like that. By all means, take advantage of it. My personal opinion on that, in general, okay, plant-based food product should have less than the mimicked, the meat counterpart. Say, for example, if I would, again, there are exceptions, okay? If you're talking about meat patty, plant-based meat patty likelihood will be less, okay? Or about the same. It depends on which area you look at. From a bacteriological point of view, plant-based, ground product could be better in shelf life. But if you talk about whole muscle, regular meat, okay, regular meat basically the inside of the meat is sterile. The outside, of course, can be contaminated. But I mean, unless it's extruded product go through temperature processing, high temperature process, extrusion, then the meat analog, I mean, because they come up, they use, ground meat, ground ingredient mixing together, there's a greater chance of cross-contamination, and therefore the shelf life, could be less. Again, it's hard to generalize everything, but there are always exceptions. But I will always use, the natural counterparts to use that as a something to compare with, and as a standard. If your shelf life is less than the actual counterparts, then you are going to be running the problem. Because consumers get used to certain things. If a frozen piece of meat can last a year, and your product can only last for 6 months, it's going to be tricky. A lot of the thing is with meat, most of the fat is saturated fats as compared to, say, the plant-based. Typically we want to avoid using highly saturated fats, and therefore, they are unsaturated, and they tend to turn to rancid. Again, generalizing it, every ingredient is different. And also the moisture content, etc., that affects that. But this is something certainly you need to look at. And I think, by using the resources available from other places, that's indeed a great information.
Awesome. So there are a few more questions left, but we are obviously over time, and this was a 2.5-hour session. So I don't want to keep the attendees too long, but whoever has mentioned a question, if you could just send it to me on email, I'll be happy to connect you with Alfred for any further answers on these 4 or 5 questions that we could not cover today. Once again, Alfred, thank you so much for your time and joining us, taking the time out, and educating us about a lot of practical insights. And I'm sure attendees have found it useful, as the feedback suggests. So thank you so much. By the way, everyone who has done a lot of college, a lot of work all day, and then have come and joined us for 2.5 hours in this late night session in Indian time. So having said that, the due dates are 25th of September for proposals turning in, and I'll be sending you some more instructions via email. So obviously keep a close eye on those. And thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great one.
Yeah, thank you so much, Shardul, as well as all the rest of the participants today. Indeed, I'm honored, and I'm wishing you all the best. And if there's any question you may have, by all means, please relate to Shardul, and I'm ready and eager to answer any question you may have, additional questions. And thank you all. And for most of you living in the Asia area, have a good night, and good dreams too. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alfred. Thanks, everyone. Take care. Good night.
Good night.